My daughter paints me as a monster in the divorce purser to help her mother and her rich stepfather. But the real monster was her stepfather, and I can't do anything because of the restraining order. I'm 45 years old and not a regular user of this platform, but while searching, I ended up reading some stories here and decided to create an account. It's not the most original username in the world, but at least it's somewhat anonymous. I need to explain everything that has happened over the past few months, so don't expect this to be short. I have no experience summarizing these things. But enough introduction, here's the context. I was married to my wife Selena, 43, for 23 years. We have 2 children, our daughter Deborah, 21, and our son Milo, 14. I worked hard as a construction manager to support my family, while Selena worked part-time as a receptionist at a local clinic. Money was tight, but we managed to give our kids a good life. Some sacrifices here, some small indulgences there, just like anyone who isn't a millionaire. The turning point came about a year ago. Selena started showing every sign of infidelity. It was like a Christmas tree with all its blinking lights. But every time I confronted her, she dismissed me, saying I was overreacting, being paranoid, or becoming a controlling husband. Then Deborah put things into perspective. One day, she came to me, clearly upset, and told me she had seen her mother having lunch with a man she didn't recognize. It could have been a colleague, but deep down, I already knew the truth. Selena wasn't just having lunch with this man. She was having an affair. The man in question was Robert, 50, a wealthy real estate developer who had recently moved to our town. He was known for throwing lavish parties and flaunting his wealth. Apparently, Selena had been attending those parties for months behind my back. We had a confrontation. She didn't deny it. She told me she wanted a divorce and that she was in love with Robert. Just like that, 23 years thrown away. At that moment, my story was just another case of a woman leaving her husband for a richer man. I had accepted it. She wanted money, and I didn't want a gold digger. The solution was simple. Give her the divorce and move on. But my real problem came later. The infidelity hurt, but I convinced myself it wasn't the worst part. I moved forward. The real pain was Deborah, the same daughter who exposed the affair, taking her mother's side. I thought she would support me, especially after how angry she was when she found out about the affair. But money is persuasive. That's why she threw me to the wolves. She told me I had always been a failure, that our life was mediocre, and that it was my fault for not aiming higher. These words didn't come from a stranger on the internet. They came from my own daughter. It hurt more than I can explain. The divorce process was brutal. With Robert's money backing her, Selena crushed me in court. They painted me as emotionally abusive, controlling, and neglectful. It was like they were describing a completely different person. To make things worse, Deborah testified against me. She told the court I had anger issues, that I was harsh and cruel to her and her mother, and even that I had threatened them. Every word was a lie. But Deborah was convincing. She had always been articulate and confident. The judge believed her. I couldn't prove otherwise. In the end, the court granted Selena nearly everything. The house, most of our savings, and worst of all, full custody of Milo. I didn't just lose my marriage and my home. I lost my relationship with my kids. Milo didn't want to go. He begged the judge to let him stay with me. But because he was still a minor, his voice didn't carry as much weight. I was given visitation rights, but that wasn't enough. My lawyer and I requested paternity tests as a legal strategy, but both kids were mine. We couldn't prove that Selena had been cheating on me all along. The recent affair carried little weight, because, in the judge's eyes, I was the monster, and my wife had simply found refuge in another man's arms for her safety. As if that weren't enough, Deborah took it a step further and filed a restraining order against me, claiming she feared for her safety. I hadn't even seen her since the court hearing. But now, I couldn't contact her at all, even if I wanted to. The court made it official. I was completely erased from her life. 3 months ago, I started trying to piece my life back together, but it has been difficult. If it had only been about my wife, I think I could have handled it. But losing my kids, especially Milo, has destroyed me. I moved into a small apartment and threw myself into my work. The only silver lining was my financial situation improving. I had saved a decent amount of money, and since I was involved in multiple projects, I was earning more. For a while, I stayed away. I thought maybe time would heal things. Maybe Deborah would realize the truth. But time passed, and nothing changed. Selena moved in with Robert, and Deborah followed. They lived in his big house, living the life Selena had always wanted. From the outside, they seemed to have everything: wealth, comfort, status. The restraining order prevented me from contacting Deborah to challenge what she had said, but I couldn't risk violating the court's decision. That could cost me my visitation rights with Milo. It wasn't long before things got worse. Milo secretly called me from Selena's house, telling me how much he hated living with Robert, how controlling he was, how miserable everything had become. Robert had complete control over their lives. He monitored their calls and conversations. It sounded exactly like the accusations Deborah had made against me, but this time, it was real. Then last week, something completely unexpected happened. I received a series of frantic text messages from Deborah. I didn't know what to do. I was supposed to stay away from her because of the restraining order. In her messages, Deborah described how Robert had become verbally abusive toward her. She said Selena controlled her expenses, criticized everything she did, and Robert exploded in rage if they didn't follow his rules. He constantly monitored where they went, who they talked to, and how they spent their time. Deborah said Robert berated Selena in front of her, calling her names, treating her like property, insulting her appearance, and even commenting on her career choices. In the end, the man they chose over me turned out to be a nightmare. I was the first to notice the irony. Everything Deborah had falsely accused me of, Robert was actually doing. And now she was asking me for help. She said she didn't know what to do, that she was desperate to get out. But because of the restraining order, she couldn't even ask me directly. At this point, I only have one question about Deborah. Would I be a bad father for letting her lie in the bed she made? She is now living exactly what she falsely accused me of. That's a valuable lesson, but my biggest concern is Milo. He's still trapped in that house, and I worry about him every single day. I could use Deborah's help to get him out of there, but because of the restraining order, I don't want to risk it. I don't want to make things worse and lose Milo completely. I don't know if the text messages will be enough. I also know that if I help Milo, I'll be helping Deborah indirectly. And she doesn't deserve that. But I won't punish my son, just because my daughter and ex-wife tried to ruin my life. Update 1. I don't think even the stories that brought me here have received as many comments as mine. That brings me some comfort. I can't begin to thank you all for the support. Of course, not all the comments are positive or in agreement with me, but I appreciate them nonetheless. For example, some people say I should help Deborah no matter what because she's my daughter and I should rescue her from that monster, even if she made me look like one. Because in the end, she's my child, and a father should always be able to forgive. I don't share that sentiment, but I want to acknowledge that I've read all the comments. Milo has been secretly calling me again, trying to avoid Robert's suspicion. According to what he's been telling me, things with Robert have gotten even worse. The controlling behavior Deborah described in her messages is even more extreme. Deborah and Selena can't leave the house without telling Robert where they're going and when they'll be back, assuming he even allows it. Milo described Robert as a man obsessed with controlling every aspect of their lives. He has overheard Robert screaming at Selena over trivial things like arriving 5 minutes later than expected. He also told me that his sister, who once thought Robert was the best choice, is now terrified of him. According to Milo, she spends most of her time in her room, avoiding any interaction with Robert to prevent triggering his rage. Selena, however, doesn't have that luxury. Milo said she seems completely broken now. She has stopped trying to stand up to Robert and simply obeys his every demand. I still don't feel an ounce of sympathy for what she's going through, but I am extremely worried about Milo. He says that for now, Robert doesn't usually treat him that way, but I don't know if that's true or if he's just a kid who doesn't want to talk about what's happening to him. I contacted my lawyer immediately after my last post to discuss the situation. He agreed that I needed to proceed with caution. He advised me to document everything Deborah had told me and file a police report, making it clear that I was doing so out of concern for their safety, not out of resentment or revenge. He also suggested filing a petition to lift the restraining order, considering the new circumstances. I followed his advice. I went to the police and filed the report, explaining Robert's behavior as described by Deborah and Milo. Milo even recorded voice messages describing the situation to support my complaint. For Deborah, I could only use her text messages. The officer who took my statement was understanding, but he warned me that unless Deborah or Selena came forward themselves, there wasn't much they could do. I was aware of the justice system's limitations, but that didn't make it any less frustrating. Meanwhile, my lawyer has officially submitted the request to lift the restraining order. We're still waiting for the court's response, but I'm hopeful the judge will see the seriousness of the situation and at least suspend the order temporarily. While all of this is unfolding, I've kept in touch with Milo. He's the only stable connection I have right now. Even my lawyer told me not to violate the restraining order. Milo is just a kid caught in the middle of all this chaos. I've assured him that I'm doing everything I can, within the boundaries of the law, to help them. I also made it clear that if he ever feels that he or anyone else is in immediate danger, he needs to call emergency services right away. I even suggested he try to secretly keep some money and essentials packed, in case he ever needs to leave quickly. He's been incredibly brave through all of this, but I know he's carrying a burden far too heavy for someone his age. I'll update when there are new developments. For now, I just want to thank everyone again for their advice and support. These past few months have been incredibly difficult, but at least now I know I'm not alone. Maybe I should have written my story a long time ago. Update 2. Before I share my update, I want to address the idea that if I believe my son is in danger, I should just go to the house and take him. It's not like I haven't thought about it. I've felt helpless, stuck here, unable to do anything. But if I had done that, the law would have taken my son away from me and handed him right back to Robert. The only difference is, Robert would now know that I know. And what would he do then? He'd take it out on Milo to get revenge. So far, Milo was safe, and I always wanted to play this smart, to make sure Milo suffered as little as possible. I know Selena and Deborah are suffering in this situation, but they are adults. They chose this. It's not like they couldn't leave and report him if they wanted to. This is important to clarify before my update. I wish I had good news, but maybe it's just too soon for things to get better. Maybe this isn't a sign of the future. Right now, it feels like the situation has taken on a life of its own. It has become even more unpredictable. A few nights ago, I got a frantic call from Milo. He was whispering, terrified. He told me Robert had lost control after finding out Deborah had done something he didn't like. According to Milo, Robert flew into one of his uncontrollable rages. He grabbed Deborah's phone and smashed it against the wall. He screamed at her at the top of his lungs. When Selena tried to intervene, Robert turned his rage on her too. But not just by yelling. He got physical. I'm sorry if I can't say much more. I don't know how graphic I can be here. But as a father, hearing this from your child, because he saw it, it's unbearable. Milo told me Robert's anger was unlike anything he had ever seen before. I told him to hold on and call the police immediately. He needed to give them Robert's address. I also called my lawyer. He told me that if I truly believed my son was in danger, I could break the restraining order. I had a valid justification. So I went. When I arrived at Robert's house, the police were already there. They were shouting at Robert, ordering him to come outside. But he wouldn't listen. We could hear the shouting from inside the house. It all felt like it was happening in slow motion. I was standing at the edge of the driveway when I heard a loud crash. Something breaking, and then the front door burst open. Deborah was the first to run out, her face covered in tears. She was sobbing uncontrollably. She ran straight to me. Before I could react, she was already apologizing over and over again. I only asked her one thing. Where is Milo? Thankfully, Milo and Selena ran out right after her. Their faces were pale. I rushed to hold Milo in my arms as the paramedics took care of Deborah and Selena. Deborah hadn't been hurt too badly. But Selena, unlike Deborah, she wasn't crying. Her face wasn't covered in tears. Her face was covered in blood. It was a small cut on her forehead, near her eyelid, a place that bleeds a lot. That's why it looked so bad. A horrifying sight. Meanwhile, the police were arresting Robert inside the house. They dragged him out, his hands cuffed behind his back, and believe me when I say this, he was furious. He was screaming all kinds of things at all of us, making wild threats. I don't think all the money in the world could save him this time. The police took statements from everyone. Deborah, Selena, and Milo all described months of abuse, every kind of abuse. Deborah finally admitted that Robert's manipulation and control had started almost the moment she moved in with him. He had isolated them, made them dependent on him, both financially and emotionally. He had slowly destroyed their self-esteem. And then, she admitted that everything she said in court about me, the supposed abuse, my so-called anger issues, had all been lies. Lies pushed by Robert. And Selena, who at that time was trapped in her own distorted version of reality. My lawyer had arrived too. Since I had broken the restraining order, he wanted to make sure they wouldn't try to arrest me. But it wasn't necessary. Selena also broke down and apologized to me. Maybe it was the trauma, maybe it was the reality finally hitting her. But she confessed that her desire for a better life had blinded her to Robert's true nature. She admitted she had been wrong. Not just for believing Robert's lies, but for dragging Deborah and Milo into them. After the police left, after Robert was taken into custody, a new reality started to settle in. The restraining order against me was lifted immediately. My lawyer is now working on reopening the divorce case. Selena and Deborah might face legal consequences for their false testimonies. And honestly, I think that's fair. I think this will be the first taste of justice I'll get. Right now, Milo is living with me in my small apartment. It's cramped, it's nothing like the big house we used to have. But right now, we need to be together. I don't know where Selena and Deborah are now, but having my son here, safe, is all that matters. I've already scheduled therapy sessions for Milo. If necessary, I'll go too. At this point, our family is completely broken, at least the part that included Selena and Deborah. But I still have my small family of two, Milo and me. This is exactly what I meant when I said I couldn't just walk in and take my son. If I had tried, before the police intervened, everything that happened to Deborah and Selena could have happened to Milo instead. The same police who ignored my reports. The same police who let all of this happen before they finally stepped in. If I had done something back when there wasn't enough proof against Robert and Milo had been sent back to him, I could never have forgiven myself. If, instead of Selena, it had been Milo walking out of that house bleeding, or worse. Update 3. The first and most important thing is that Robert has now been formally charged with multiple counts of domestic abuse, coercive control, and criminal threats. It's a huge relief to know that he is in custody, and the prosecutor has assured us that, given the overwhelming amount of evidence and our testimonies, it is highly unlikely that he will be granted bail before his trial. That's good news, because if you had seen him that night, being dragged out of his house in handcuffs, you would know that he is the kind of person who needs to stay locked up for a long time. Robert's arrest has caused quite a stir in the community, especially considering the image he had built for himself. No one had ever suspected the real person behind the wealth and charm, but behind closed doors, he was a different man, one who thrived on control and fear. His trial is still a long way off, but I have confidence that justice will be served. Many of you have asked what's next for Milo and me, as well as for Deborah and Selena. Milo is still living with me. As for Deborah and Selena, they're currently staying with one of my ex-wife's friends. Deborah has asked for Milo to come back and live with her, but I told her that after everything that's happened, I deserve this time with him. She didn't argue. Some might call me heartless for not forgiving my daughter, for not seeing that she was manipulated, first by Selena and then by Robert, into doing what she did. But it's not like she had a gun to her head when she testified against me. The only thing she had was money and the life her new stepfather could offer her. Sometimes, a parent has to let their child make a stupid decision so they can see for themselves why it was a mistake. Deborah made an incredibly stupid one, and her punishment is that I can no longer look at her the same way. If I'm being honest, I don't know if I ever will. I can't say that I will never forgive her, but I also can't promise that I ever will. Those are promises I know I can't make. On the legal front, my lawyer has been amazing. Thanks to Deborah retracting her previous testimony and the new evidence proving Robert's abusive behavior, we have been able to reopen the divorce case. The judge has indicated that the original decision, which was heavily biased against me due to the false accusations, will likely be overturned. This means I might be able to regain some of what I lost: my financial stability, my home, and most importantly, my dignity. It's a strange feeling, to be honest. I never thought I would get the chance to clear my name. And while it's bittersweet knowing how much damage has already been done, I'm grateful for this second chance. Many of you have expressed concern for Milo, and I want to thank you for that. Despite his young age, he is an incredibly strong kid. His resilience and maturity have amazed me. He's only 14, but he has handled this situation with a level of composure I never expected. I know a parent should never lean on their child, that it should always be the other way around. But Milo has been my rock, just by being here with me. You have no idea how much I missed him. I know that, sooner or later, he will have to go back to his mother unless I get full custody, which might actually be possible. But even if I don't, I'm just happy knowing that I will have more time with him. There have also been many questions about whether I have forgiven Selena. The answer isn't as simple as just no. The cheating? No, I haven't forgiven that. And the lies she told in court? Definitely not. But at least she has started trying to make things right by admitting some of what she did. I don't think there's a middle ground between forgiving someone and not forgiving them, but if I had to describe my feelings towards Selena right now, I would say they're complicated. No, I will not get back together with her. No, I will not be friends with this woman. But at the very least, she's not making things harder. She knows she could legally demand that Milo live with her right now, but she hasn't. Maybe she's afraid of what I might do in retaliation, but that doesn't soften me in the slightest. I will go to court and demand everything that rightfully belongs to me. The only difference her cooperation makes is whether, After this storm passes, we have a completely broken relationship, or at least a civil one. Update 4: No, Robert hasn't made me disappear. It's just that trials take time, and I didn't want to come back with nothing to say except that my lawyer asked for a document. But today we had a hearing where a lot was discussed. First of all, the divorce ruling has been overturned, and with that, many of the things I lost. For starters, the house. It was something that had been awarded to Selena as compensation for painting me as a monster, a house she ended up selling when she moved in with Robert. Not only has the decision to give her full ownership been reversed, but the house is now legally mine again. The only problem? The house has already been sold. But that issue has been resolved. I was awarded the full amount from the sale, plus extra compensation because it was sold below market value in order to get rid of it quickly. Custody of Milo was also revisited, and given Selena's history, I petitioned for and won full custody of him. From now on, he will be with me full-time, and it will be Selena who has visitation rights. I know she didn't expect me to do this. That's why her attitude toward me has suddenly changed. But I said I was going after everything, and that's exactly what I did. We also filed a lawsuit against Robert for his involvement in the divorce trial. Now, with all this money, Milo and I are looking for a new home, a real home. No more cramped little apartment. We want a place where we each have our own room, a game room, and even a big backyard where we can play sports. And as you might have noticed, Deborah isn't part of these new plans. If I'm not mistaken, I haven't mentioned her once in this entire update, and there's a reason for that. She simply hasn't been an important part of my life lately. No, Milo isn't the golden child, as someone called him. It's just that Deborah has been a very bad daughter to me, and I'm not going to wait around for the day she decides to stab me in the back the moment she finds a better father than me. Both she and her mother have been fined for lying in the divorce trial, so at least they've faced some legal consequences. Socially, however, neither of them can walk down the street without being recognized. Not just because of their connection to the Robert case, but also for the lies they told during the divorce and for what they put Milo through.